According to Plan by Ray Darby. It was after 9 o'clock when Ben Wayne's taxi drew up at the corner, half a block from Dr. Ridgway's white house in suburban Linwood. Ben paid the driver, being careful to keep his face averted and the hat pulled low over his eyes. He mentally cursed that hat. It was quite a trick to keep it on his head at all, because it was at least 2 sizes too small. As the taxi pulled away, Ben straightened his tie and smoothed the jacket of the double-breasted suit he had taken off the man in the jail corridor. The suit fitted him better than the hat, although Ben hated gray. He had always been a smart dresser, preferring browns or the darker tweeds. He hoped the guy in the corridor was still unconscious. If he came to and worked the gag off, he could raise a holler, and Ben's whole plan depended on getting at least a 2-hour start. It was a good plan. Ben had figured it all out after he'd gotten his brains unscrambled back there in Los Angeles County Jail. This had taken time, because when they brought Ben in, he was raving. A man could go all to pieces over a woman. It was a good plan, and yet, as he hurried down the street toward Dr. Ridgway's house, Ben couldn't help thinking about all the things that could go wrong. The guy whose clothes he had taken might wake up and raise the alarm. The doctor might have changed his schedule. This would be fatal. It would leave Ben away out on the end of a limb, ruining his revenge and leaving him only the slim hope of hiding out somewhere in the city. But luck was with him. The doctor's big black sedan was parked out in front of the house, and it was still only 20 minutes past 9. Ben made sure he was unobserved, and then he opened the back door of the car and squeezed in, doubling up his big body so that he was out of sight on the floor. It was cramped in there. The floor of the car was gritty against his hands and his cheek, but now that Ben was so close to success, minor discomforts didn't really bother him. After 5 minutes of this, his back and shoulder ached like fury. He thought about Dr. Ridgway to get his mind off it. He wondered if the wound had left a scar on Dr. Ridgway's face. The thought that he might have marred that handsome face permanently was pleasing to Ben. It was the next best thing to putting a bullet clean through his head, which Ben would have done if he hadn't had too many drinks in him at the time. A door slammed up at the house. Ben froze. Hurrying footsteps approached the car. In spite of the tightness in his throat, Ben had a momentary feeling of satisfaction. Everything was working according to plan. The doctor was supposed to be at the hospital by 10 o'clock, and he was right on schedule. The front door of the car opened, and he heard Ridgway get in. The doctor was breathing heavily. He jammed his foot on the starter, slammed the car into gear, and roared away from the curb with a spurt that ground Ben's cheek against the gritty floor. Ben counted to 20 slowly before he got up. Then he raised himself just high enough to see the back of the doctor's head. Ridgway was hatless. In the shifting light, Ben took note of the well-shaped head, the hair curling at the temples and beginning to gray. The doctor was handsome. There was no use denying it. A guy could hardly blame a girl like Louise for falling for him. Ben was not handsome. He was just a big, ordinary guy, but Louise had loved him as no girl ever had, until she caught pneumonia and Dr. Ridgway entered the picture. That was where they had both been wrong. Louise may have been everything they said she was at the preliminary hearing, even a she-devil with the face of an angel, but she had belonged to Ben. Ben reached into his pocket and took out the revolver. He pressed it gently against the back of Ridgway's neck. "Don't turn around," he said. "Keep right on driving. Turn right when you get to Lakewood Boulevard." The doctor's body went rigid. The car lurched, then straightened out again. "Ben!" "That's right, Doc. Ben. I told you I'd bust out." "What do you want with me?" "Plenty. You're going to help me get to Mexico." "Help you?" The doctor's voice was scornful. "I wouldn't help you across the street." Ben pressed the gun harder against the back of his neck. "Sure you will," he said. "I've come this far, and I'm going the rest of the way. They'll never put me in San Quentin." You had to hand it to the doctor. He had guts. His neck muscles relaxed, and Ben knew that his quick brain was working. He felt a little uneasy. He would have felt really uneasy if he hadn't planned this thing so thoroughly. "If they get you now," Ridgway said reasonably, "they'll give you double the sentence. Look, Ben, let me out. Take my car and make a run for it. You've already tried to kill me once." "Shut up," Ben snapped. "Turn here." The car swung into the heavier traffic of Lakewood Boulevard heading south. One false move, Ben said, and I'll let you have it. How do I know you won't anyway? You don't. That's the gamble you're taking. For a few minutes, the car droned steadily on. Then the doctor tried a new approach. Ben, if you're still sore about Louise, get over it. You would have lost her anyway. His voice grew bitter. I lost her too. She's fascinating, maddening. She drove you wild, and I don't blame you. But Ben, she's as cold and calculating as a machine. Forget her, Ben. You can lay off the fancy talk, Ben said. It's no use. Just past Lakewood Village, near the airport, Ben said, turn here, to the right. Dr. Ridgway slowed the car. The road that branched off to the right was little more than a dark trail. Ben, the doctor said, and for the first time there was a note of fear in his voice. You're not rational. Let me turn around. Let me talk to you. You're making a big mistake, Ben. The talking's all over with, Ben said. Keep going. But you don't understand. Why risk your neck over Louise? She's not worth it. Listen to me, Ben. Ben swung the muzzle of his gun and cracked it smartly against the side of Dr. Ridgway's head. Keep going. The big sedan entered the shadowy canyon of the trees and was swallowed up. At Signal Hill, Ben turned into Highway 101. The big car purred. The road lay ahead of him, all the way down to San Diego and from there across the border into Mexico. He felt the reassuring bulge in the pocket of his gray suit, where he had put Ridgway's billfold with all his identification papers. He glanced at the automobile registration card that was clipped to the steering post of the car. There it was, Dr. Ridgway. Ben smiled a tight smile and tried to feel as he ought to feel, being a doctor. He remembered, with a little flush of pleasure, that there had been a scar on Ridgway's face from his first bullet. This time, his gun had made more than a scar. There were 2 state police cars blocking the highway just after he cleared Long Beach. Ben took a deep breath and slowed down. He had been expecting this. Looking for someone, officer? He asked the trooper who came over. That's right. It was hard for Ben not to laugh out loud. He knew whom they were looking for. He knew they'd be looking twice as hard after they found Ridgway's body, but by that time he would be lost in the wastes of Mexico. Your name? The trooper asked him. Ridgway, Ben answered calmly. Dr. Emery Ridgway. My card? The trooper took the proffered card and turned it over in his hand. Ben took out the doctor's driver's license and his insurance identification card, playing it to the hilt. The trooper glanced at these too. Good enough? Ben inquired. The trooper nodded. Fine, doctor. Anything I can do to help? Ben asked. There hasn't been an accident, has there? No, the trooper said. Not yet. Suddenly, Ben found himself staring down the barrel of a big service revolver. He turned quickly, but another trooper was leaning in the opposite window of the car. What's the meaning of this? Ben spluttered. End of the line, doctor, the first trooper said grimly. We figured you'd try to make a run for it. Get out of the car with your hands up. Ben's jaw hung slack with bewilderment. All this was away over his head. The first trooper said, We found the body of Louise Hilton at your house, just after you lit out. One of the neighbors heard her scream. That woman was no good, doctor, but you shouldn't have killed her. Now come out with your hands up.